Good Sunday evening, gentlemen. What's going on? Not used to doing this on a Sunday. So we were supposed to do this on Thursday, but my wife was away Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and she got in late, and then I ended up having to work a night shift Thursday night. So I asked these guys if they'd be all right with coming on tonight, and it worked out for all our schedules. Now, I had met Paul List at the Catholic Identity Conference a couple of weeks ago, and him, Michael, and myself spent some time together chatting, and we had some really interesting conversations. Paul had given me a copy of his book, which reads like the Bible. I mean, when I tell you guys,
Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, right.
It's like buying Dianetics. Yeah. But I thought instead of just having Paul, I figured we get Michael on too, maybe continue some of our conversation that we had at the conference. I like to bring people together that aren't always, typically together. But the truth is that Michael had Paul on earlier in the week. He had him on Thursday, actually.
Yep.
So this is actually going to be like a part 2 to that interview. So Michael and Paul got into depth on what each character's trait means in the book. And there's a bunch of stuff that will basically, you could go back, watch Michael's interview with Paul if you find this interesting. That was on the Lepanto Institute YouTube channel. So if you guys find this interesting, go over there. But either way, go subscribe to Michael's YouTube channel at the Lepanto Institute. How are you guys doing today?
Tired.
Good. I was just noticing that Rob brought a beer. I hope he brought enough for all of us.
I have enough in my fridge. You're welcome to come over.
I sure wish they'd hurry up with that transporter.
Yeah, right.
I actually I have basically like a half day tomorrow. The company is off tomorrow for St. Christopher Columbus Day.
Indigenous peoples.
Yeah. I'm in an Italian union, so we still celebrate Christopher Columbus.
St. Christopher Columbus Day.
So the company is off tomorrow, but I have to go in and do some stuff. But I get to sleep in a little bit tomorrow. But Paul, okay. So I never read the Silmarillion, but reading in the beginning of this book, I found
you haven't read the Lord of the Rings either.
No. So listen, that's what I'm going to get into. So okay. Paul opens up the book talking about how it's once you've seen a movie, it changes everything. So like if you read a book without seeing the movie, you will develop in your imagination an entire landscape and go in depth of what you have in your mind for what you're reading. But if you try to read the book after you've seen the movie, you can't separate the images from the movie from what you're reading in the book.
That's why all the Protestants are going to have an autistic Matthew in their head now forever.
Well, from the Chosen. That's actually a good point. Like that was one of the. So Rob and I reviewed one of the seasons of The Chosen, but one of the dangers of making a movie depicting the life of Christ is that when you're reading scripture, you will then put your Jonathan Rumi version of Christ in your head. You'll put your what's his name?
Caviezel?
Jim Caviezel version, or even the 1970s Jesus of Nazareth, like Robert Powell. Mm-hmm. Like I grew up watching Robert Powell Jesus. So even later on in my life, when I would read the scriptures, it's hard to make that separation. So I found that really interesting. But one of the most interesting parts I never knew about Tolkien is that he was during World War II, along with Alan Turing, right? Where Alan Turing was going in with code breaking, and you have a thesis about Tolkien seeing what Alan Turing was doing and that really having an effect on him, right?
Oh, it had a profound effect on him. Tolkien was recruited among the dons of Oxford and Cambridge to be part of a very elite, secretive code cracking team in or around Bletchley Park. On staff there was Alan Turing. Alan Turing was an award-winning mathematician. He had won a very prestigious award that was the answering the Inskydex problem, which was put out by David Hilbert about a generation before. About, can we write an algorithm that will tell us whether or not our program is going to have an answer or not, so we don't waste all this time, trying to figure it out, and it doesn't have an answer at all. And I think it was Alonzo Church a mathematician, also he did it mathematically and said, no, you can't do that. Well, what Alan Turing did in 1936 in his paper on computable numbers with an application to the exciting problem actually built a machine theoretically on paper. And this is what it would be. It'd be a tape, and it would be ones and zeros. It'd be use the binary code of Leibniz, and it would have a scanner eye. The scanner eye is very important. That's the eye of Sauron. Right? And the ring is ones and zeros. That's the language, and that's why only Frodo can carry it. And that's why because he's temperance, and that's why the eye is constantly looking, constantly searching for the ones and zeros, because that's what the scanner eye did.
So
And,
okay, so you said a lot there. Now, all right, if you guys want to understand kind of what he's saying there, where Frodo is temperance, okay, Paul has this thesis where what Tolkien is doing in the Lord of the Rings, from what I got, I only got about 100 pages into the book, or maybe even a little bit less than that. I read it on my flight home, and then I've been trying to grab it each night before getting you on.
Sure, yeah.
But it seems like what you're saying is that the Lord of the Rings, the entire setting is kind of taking place in one man.
It is, but it's a representative human being that represents the entire Western civilization. Arda is its name, and that's the material and the immaterial separated by the sea. And the sea is the domain of one of the Ainur, the angelic creatures that are really just the facets of the soul. And his domain is touch. And we have feelings. In Middle Earth is the material brain. Arda across the sea is the immaterial intellect. And that's where these rational facets of the soul, the Ainur. You haven't read the Silmarillion, so people say, well, that I don't believe it. Tolkien, he hated allegory. Look, just once you understand and you see who the Ainur, and they're called the Ainur because they're like angelic beings, and Aquinas famously called the angels the intelligences. So Tolkien gives them a derivative name, the Ainurs. It's hilarious. Tolkien has such a great, but you can't deny it. They all fit perfectly. And then Tom Bombadil's the rational will, and Goldberry, his wife, is the rational intellect, which is also the conscience. But now, has
anybody else bounced this theory around, or do you think you kind of discovered it?
No, nobody's come close. Everybody. I mean, this was just. It wasn't God's will that it be discovered until it was time to intersect with what it was supposed to intersect with, which is the machine, which is about to dominate humanity and likely try to destroy us. And Tolkien knew that, and he just sent it into the future and said, nothing to see here. No, doesn't mean anything. Nothing to see here, knowing that at one time or another, in God's time, not his, it would come to light. And it has. It's come to light. I just did what God showed me and scared the hell out of me to make sure that I did. And I read like a madman, and then it all just came together, and I gave myself a scholastic education. The thing about a lot of interpreters, unfortunately, most of them have gone to academia, and they've been polluted with the Cartesian materialist, phenomenalist mindset, and they don't study as scholastics, and I studied as a scholastic, and then it just was obvious to me after that. It just became so obvious, and it was so much fun just to figure out who everybody was, and it all just fit perfectly. And my co-author didn't believe me for a couple of years. He actually, and I didn't realize it, I was describing something in the Silmarillion, and he goes, well, that's artists having remorse. This is contrition. I said, well, yeah, of course, just mortal sin has happened and destroyed the light of the trees died, because Ungoliant, the big spider in the Silmarillion, is mortal sin, and Morgoth is original sin, not Satan. And he goes, I just now believe you. I just now understand what you're talking about, and I just now believe you. I'm like, what?
Ungoliant
helping me for this long? And he goes, yeah, I'm just helping you as a friend.
Ungoliant's kind of like concupiscence. that hunger to do wrong.
Well, concupiscence and irascibility are Tulkas is irascibility. He's the wrestler. Okay, he's the one that's always fighting Morgoth, always chaining Morgoth and whatnot. That's irascibility before they've fallen. And is it Nesse? I've got all the characters in the back of the book, but Nesse is the concupiscent powers, and this is all scholasticism. And once you understand scholasticism, then there's no doubt anymore. It becomes so obvious. And I've had a lot of doubters, and then they actually read and they go, oh my God, you're right. It's totally, this is like catechism. It's scholastic catechism. Yeah, it's an essay, is a concupiscent power married to.
So, okay, so you think Tolkien's encounter with Turing,
Yeah.
he was able to see, because we all know the Turing test is considered like the gold standard for once artificial intelligence is reached, right? It's where you as a human cannot tell whether you're interacting with a machine or a human. Now, you think Tolkien's interaction with Turing back in the 1930s
39, yeah.
had that much of an effect on him that he foresaw transhumanism on the horizon?
Absolutely. He saw the attack on the mass. Absolutely, the attack on the mass, the white tree of Gondor that's always being persecuted and can't be tended. No one can tend it. It's a TLM. It's right. He takes that from Cicero's Marian Oak poem, and like right out of like the second paragraph of Prescendi Dominici Grigi of Pius X, where Pius X compares the church to a tree, and the modernists take the axe to the root of the tree. And yeah, it had a huge effect on him. Tolkien said that it was a very Catholic work, unconsciously in the beginning, and then very consciously in the revisions. And you know, the right before, I mean, it was published. Lord of the Rings was published in 1954, and the most important papers that, well, two of the most important papers of Alan Turing, which are available in, you know, the London Royal Science Institute, and you know all the all the fancy publications, where the first one was the On Computable Numbers with an Application to the Skylinks Problem in 1936, where he actually, that's where the Turing test comes from. What you're talking about is the imitation game, and that came out of his paper on computing machinery and intelligence, written in like 1951. And then Chemical Basis of Morphogenesis came out in I think 1952. So he went back and revised and added many critical elements from those papers into his mythology. For instance, Sauron has all the pieces and parts that are the computer parts that come right out of all the important things: the algorithm, statistics and probabilities, the hardware, the program software, the eye, the language, the 1 and 0. Everything. And over time, by the time in the Third Age, Sauron becomes artificial intelligence, and the Tower of Barad-dûr is actually the digital microchip in Mordor. Mordor is located, according to phrenology, which is a kind of a pseudoscience of the Victorian age, where they supposedly they knew where all these areas of the head were responsible for certain things. And so Mordor, the Tower of Barad-dûr, is the microchip. And the rings, like I was telling Michael, the rings are provide the crossover between how the digital realm computes with the analog realm. So the note, it's all music. The rings of power are the notes of the dominant ninth chord. The harmonic overtone series plays a huge part in this. Everything is music. If you read the opening, the Ainu Lindule, which is the creation story, which everybody thought, well, it's kind of like Genesis. Well, yeah, but Tolkien would never compete with the story of Genesis. He made a partner myth. You know, this is a myth. He made a partner the creation of a single human being, and that's Arda, within which the material brain is Middle Earth, and we have all these characteristics. Everybody wonders, well, why it seems so personal? I mean, it just seems like it's so applicable to myself. Well, yeah, because we all have these facets and these assets and these habits and vices and you know, all these things. So, you know, it's very much a scholastic thing. But Tolkien interacting with Turing, realizing when they were trying to crack the Enigma machine, which was a ciphering machine made up of cylindrical wheels of different ratios, and you could actually change them around. And so you could type something in one end and transport it over the radio waves, and you'd have a guy, you know, punching it in, coming in, and his machine was set up the same way, and they changed the settings on the machine sometimes a couple times a day. Well, we had captured, the Allied forces had captured an Enigma machine.
Mhm.
So it wasn't a matter of language. It wasn't really, Tolkien would realize very early that this has got nothing to do with language. This is mathematics. This is probabilities and statistics. So we can figure out how the machine is set up really fast. And that's what they did. They realized with probabilities and mathematics, and Tolkien got out because he realized that all we're going to do is I'm going to participate in making another machine in the theater of war that's going to advance on humanity, and I'm not participating in it. He ducked out. And then he went back to writing The Lord of the Rings, and he added all these things into it as he went.
Okay, so this is a question I have. You said the term morphogenesis.
Yeah.
What is morphogenesis?
Like I told, the definition, well, it's how things grow from a homogeneous substance in a state of unstable equilibrium with a disturbance. It grows into something like a human being or a horse or a plant or whatever. It's an offspring. It's really an offspring of what was called formerly embryology. And embryology had come pretty far in Turing's day. I mean, considering the limit that we had in our technology, it had come pretty far. Well, Alan Turing picked it up and he applied his statistics and probabilities that he weaponized to defeat the Nazis. He developed that and narrowed the mathematics down to the real nitty gritty of when change actually first starts, or just before it starts, and applied mathematics to that. Harmonics, in this case, it would have been spherical harmonics in the three-dimensional world, but on paper he limited his explanation to the two-dimensional harmonics, and that's why he uses rings. And he uses rings. He uses rings as his example of the certain disturbances in mathematics would cause predictable outcomes in the generation of patterns. And one of the things that he describes, actually, right in the preamble, like I said, was in a hydra. If you cut the hydra with this, you could actually, because a hydra regenerates, you could actually, with the right, mathematically, you could figure out exactly where the hydra, the tentacles will appear. And of course, Tolkien uses that outside the gates of Moria. That's that's not water that the Watcher comes out of. And when Boromir picks up the stone, that's the disturbance. And the rings come out. You can see, if you read the book, you can see it was a terrible, like slimy, hideous substance. It wasn't water. Frodo stepped in it and it really bothered him. And you could see like bloops coming up, almost like fish jumping out, but they weren't fish. That was Tolkien just indicating that it's a homogeneous substance. It doesn't even reflect the light of the sun. It's the homogeneous substance in a state of unequal or unstable equilibrium. It's unstable. And what was the disturbance? The disturbance was Boromir picked up a rock, not Pippin like in the movie. Boromir picked up a stone and threw it way out in the middle, and then the rings came. And when the movie does a pretty good job of this, the rings come, and you think, oh, there's something underwater. It's moving toward the shore. It's not. The morphogenic ring is coming out, and when it touches the outer edge, just as like the Hydra, those tentacles come into being in that instant. They come into being right there. And Tolkien does a really good job of like new green. It's like something that just was born, or something was just came into life. And of course, it reaches out and grabs for Frodo because Frodo has the ring. And Saruman had called himself a ring maker. And Saruman had taken over Isengard, which is the blackened ivory tower of academia. He's practical wisdom, fallen practical wisdom. And he manages now and dominates Moria, that are the halls of academia. And that's where the dwarves are. Dwarves are scientific knowledge in the mind.
So, well, Michael, you sent me I made my first coming on to National Catholic Reporter recently. So Michael sent me my first time making it into National Catholic Reporter, and it was a conversation me and Patrick Coffin had about weather manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I had mentioned that in the text with you and Paul, with Michael and Paul, and you said that was morphogenesis, and you said there's a form of morphogenesis. Fill the atmosphere with aluminum nonparticles, and it becomes pretty simple to manipulate with electromagnetic energy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Daniel O'Connor, who Michael and I both know, recently wrote this whole post saying how we can't allow the powers of God are God is in control of nature. So when we attribute too much to they, you know what I mean? When we say they can manipulate the weather and stuff like that, like I know this is a veering off of the conversation where we just were, but do you because I'm really curious as to if I'm overhyping this in my head. Rob's constantly telling me, like, dude, stop it. They can't really do that. So, and I have no idea. Like, I really don't know. But some people are so confident, and when they talk about it, and they're just like, yeah, they could steer things and they can make them more powerful. Like, Michael, what's your position on that?
Okay, so first of all, demons can manipulate matter. Period. We know that, and they do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anybody that's ever seen a haunted house, anybody that's ever seen, a demonic manifestation, will tell you that demons will pick up objects, they'll move objects, they can actually make objects disappear from our sight and reappear other places. So their ability to manipulate matter exists. Okay, that's not a disputable thing for anybody. You have to accept, yes, they can manipulate matter. Okay, if they can manipulate matter, the question then is, to what extent? And we can tell you, or when I say we, I mean the church will tell you, that there are instances where it is proper to rebuke the spirits of the air because they are causing certain catastrophic events. They can cause people to drown by pulling them into a river. They can cause dust storms and wind storms. They can do all sorts of things. They can even manifest all kinds of pestilence, like a bunch of fleas or a bunch of cockroaches or, a bunch of flies just appear out of nowhere. So these manifestations do exist. They are proper to the demonic realm. Why? Because as angels, they were given a particular nature to control some aspect of creation. Everybody has a guardian angel. Your guardian angel was assigned to you from the very beginning. That guardian angel, when he accepted the mission to be your guardian and only your guardian and no one else's guardian, then from all eternity, at the very beginning of time, all the way until this present moment, your guardian angel was waiting to be with you in particular. And what does he do? He protects you from spiritual harm. He protects you from temptation, but he can also protect you from physical harm as well. So the angels are there to do things to protect us physically. Conversely, there are demons that recognize that you, having a redeemable nature, and the angel having lost one of the thrones in heaven, that particular demon recognizes, hey, that guy might take my throne, and I don't want that to happen. So what's he going to do? He's going to do things to trip you up. So there's a constant spiritual struggle going on around you. It's not just this thing that happens in your head where it's like, ooh, whisper here and whisper there. That happens frequently, and that's the most common interaction that we have with the spiritual realm. But it doesn't mean that they don't have the power to manipulate matter. So they can do that. There are prayers that literally rebuke the spirits of the air, and they are Catholic prayers. Why do they exist if they can't manipulate matter? There are stories of the lives of the saints where the saints stopped storms that had a demonic spirit behind them. Okay, these things do happen. So and it drives me crazy. I love Daniel O'Connor to death. I mean, the guy he's brilliant, but there's too much of a rationalist. And the problem is that it's rationalism to the point of materialism, where the demons and the angels don't really have any kind of influence on us physically. They don't have any physical interaction with us. It's just all in your head.
Right.
Well, if you do that, then you're actually discounting something that they actually can do, and that's dangerous also. We don't want to go around and say that the demons they can do all sorts of things. They're all powerful on earth. No, they're not. They can only do whatever they're permitted to do by God. And when sin increases in the world, kind of like turning out the lights or dimming the lights in a room, what happens? The shadows increase, the darkness increases. And when you have the increase of darkness, spiritual darkness in the world, they have a greater authority. And with that authority, they're going to use and leverage that authority to get what they want. Sometimes that means destruction. So there's a balance to be had. And Daniel O'Connor is right in this sense. We don't want to give too much power to the demonic realm, but you don't want to
downplay
it too much either, because if you do, you're putting yourself in a dangerous position. There's a balance.
Yeah.
Recognize that there is an authority and a power, but also recognize that it's limited by God's will and by our participation with either the good or the bad. So is there a way for the demonic to get involved with a hurricane? Sure. There's no reason for us to think that they can't. But the question is this something that God would permit? Would they allow them permission to do something like that? That's why we have rebukes of the spirits of the air. That's why we have those kinds of prayers. In case, I mean, it's not like you can talk to the storm and say, "Hey, storm, are you involved with the demonic?" You can't do that.
Well, the one time I saw Rob actually kind of go, okay, maybe you got a point there, was it wasn't about giving so much power to the scientists that they're able to do this. I was like, Rob, these people literally worship demons. Like,
Yeah.
You don't think that they're doing some kind of witchcraft capabilities here, and I don't want to get overly obsessed with the demonic, but
I'm just saying then nothing's different now than it was 1,000 years ago. And our government has no more power to do these things now than it would have.
Well, with technology assisted, I would think they, because I think technology is even influenced by the.
Do you know what's interesting about the rise of technology? Do you know when the Ouija board was invented?
Probably the 1940s.
End of the 1800s.
Oh, 1800s?
1890.
Yeah.
It was patented in the United States in 1890. Prior to that, they were called witch boards, or spirit boards. But the Ouija board was literally patented in 1890. Right after that, you had a massive boom in technological increase.
Mm-hmm.
You also had a great interest from the scientific community in the occult. The vast majority of scientists at the turn of the century were involved in spiritualism. And the rocket scientist,
look at NASA,
Parsons.
Yeah, NASA. I mean,
but
half of NASA was Operation Paperclip. Yeah. They're all Nazis.
I would just like to
was intimately involved with Aleister Crowley.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Paul.
Well, it's not so much that the demons are directly involved. They're indirectly involved by their influence over human beings.
Sure.
Human beings have a free will. And let's face it, there's going to be no shortage of human beings who are going to do whatever it takes to get a leg up on everybody else and get richer and have more power. And when they can, they're given this information, let's face it, the angelic spirits are, for better or worse, on both sides, are much, much more intelligent than we are. Okay. And they can give information, and they can point people in directions, and they can manipulate. I'm not saying that the demons themselves are manipulating the weather, but I have little doubt that the demons themselves are helping those in power that want this power, that are willing to give themselves over to the demons for this information so they can manipulate the weather. If you've read Blessed Anne Catherine's The Life of Jesus Christ, book 1, and it's the Genesis, and you understand those are the people that the giants that had become so wicked and evil. They were the children. Okay. They were the children of the women that had allowed themselves to become totally possessed by the fallen angels on the mountain. Mm-hmm. And it's not like the angels didn't copulate with the women. They don't do that, but the women had become witches. They had become absolutely demonic. And then their children could do anything. She says they could do anything. And they were the ones that actually helped Noah build the ark. Because they could build anything. They helped Noah build the ark, and they made fun of him and tormented him, and he paid them in cattle, and then he floated away and they drowned. But this link with technology and the demonic power is very real. My point with the cloud. A cloud is a homogeneous substance in a state of unstable equilibrium. Okay, that's pretty good definition for a cloud. It's just the homogeneous substance is typically, well, first off, water molecules, and then whatever the pollutant is or whatever's added for better or for worse. And in this case, it would be a highly conductive metal. Aluminum is on par with copper as far as conductivity goes. So when you've got nanoparticles, it becomes so tiny, and they're so intricately woven into. I mean, I think a water molecule is a tenth of a micron, a tenth of a nanometer. It's pretty small, but these nanoparticles can be as small as 1 nanometer. So they're not far bigger, and it's the very, very tiny. And this is the thing that Alan Turing was so good at, was getting down to the very small area, not only in size but also in time, and getting the division of change, getting right there where you almost don't even see, you can't even really see any change, but you can calculate it. You can calculate it mathematically, and we're using his mathematics that he had developed in, I think, 51 or 52, or around 1950. A paper came out in 51 or 52, and the science, modern technology, is using that now for artificial intelligence to actually generate and develop their own neural network synthetic brains. So, I mean, this is right along the thing. And Alan Turing, like I was describing to Michael last week, one of his main objectives was to create a machine that would be indiscernible from a human being in our interaction. It would ultimately be so his dead friend, who happened to have a homosexual relationship with Michael, could come back, his soul can come back and be housed in this machine. It's transhumanism. It's absolutely transhumanism. And we see that. You guys haven't read the Silmarillion, but there's a character called
Rob has. I just haven't.
I have. Yeah.
Turing Bar is Alan Turing, and he has a very off-color, not intentional relationship with his sister. He doesn't know it's his sister, and they have a child, and the child is unborn, and it goes into she commits suicide. Well, that child is Tolkien's way of bringing in the whole concept of morphogenesis, which was originally embryology. Okay, so it's very, very, very clever. It's described in my book, and it's really, really interesting. And so Turing Bar, actually, the sword that he has, I think, is Anglishell, and that's one of the pieces to the computer, and that's probabilities and statistics. Then he's got the Dragon Helm, which is the memory, okay, and that's where the memory is stored. And I won't go into it too far because you can buy the book and read it. But and I strongly recommend that you do.
Well, the thing I want to do with this, so we may keep bouncing back to Tolkien and everything, but I did want to get you guys on just to fire off ideas with you guys, because I think you're both very interesting guys, and it's I kind of thought if we just did a book interview, you'd get
an interesting time.
Yeah, we're just in such interesting times in general, and I like just talking. Even the Northern Lights coming. I saw the Northern Lights from my house for the first time in my life the other day. Now my son saw them 3 months ago from a beach recently. Now I went outside my house and the sky was very visibly pink. Then when I put my camera up to it, it was like, holy cow, but that's not really what I saw. So the last time when you hear Our Lady talking about you'll see a strange light, that was right before World War II. Are we seeing signs in the skies right now that are maybe God giving us some warning? Because that's kind of what Daniel O'Connor was saying the other day too. We have to realize catastrophe, natural disasters, catastrophes, signs in the skies. You would have at a different time in history, not just written this off to, they're manipulating the weather. You would have said, God is warning us of something right now. And one of the things we talked about while we were at the CIC was how we no longer look at the sky anymore because of light pollution. Light pollution has destroyed man's imagination. And it's to the point where now when we see something crazy in the sky happening, we just write it off to, they're manipulating it or something. And I don't know if we're missing something that God's trying to get our attention with.
So can I blow your mind a little bit?
Yeah,
please.
Okay. First of all, I do want to thank Traditionalist Catholic. He mentioned Jack Parsons is the guy I was trying to think of. All I could remember is Alan Parsons Project. And I was like, nope, it's not Alan Parsons. It's somebody else Parsons. What was
iRobot. Great album.
Yeah, right.
It's no coincidence. There's a little irony there. iRobot. Great album.
Yeah. So your observation about the aurora being kind of a sign of things, I actually wrote about this the other day for my newsletter. And what occurred to me is that, so in 1917, the flood or the apparition at Fatima on October the 13th was preceded by a torrential downpour. Okay. People were ankle deep in mud, and they waited overnight for the apparition. The next day came, and at the appointed hour, all of a sudden the rain stopped. It went away. The clouds parted without any breeze, and everybody looked up at the sun, and they saw all these colors coming out from the sun. Some of them described it as a pinwheel effect, but what a lot of the eyewitnesses recounted was that they were bathed in colors, as if all these colors were coming down from the sun and just covering them. So I would look over at Anthony. Anthony'd be covered in blue, and Rob would be covered in red, and Paul would be covered in yellow. So all these colors emanated from the sun and came down and bathed them in colors. Here's the fascinating thing. First of all, and then of course it all culminated in the sun descending on the earth, looking like it was going to burn everything up. So you have a pattern here: deluge, rainbow, fire falling from the sky. In the book of
this is Michael Hichborn at his best, by the way, guys. I love when he goes into stuff like this.
In Luke's gospel, the apostles asked our Lord, what's it going to be like in the end times? Now, he's asked the same question in Matthew, but I like to use Luke because Luke gives two details. He says, as it was in the days of Noah, etc. And then he says, as it was in the days of Lot, etc. So here you have a pattern: deluge, fire falling from the sky. We know that after the flood of Noah, you had the rainbow coming out. Well, why the rainbow? What was it that caused the flood to begin with? And there are a lot of indications to show that it was sodomy that led to the flood. And we, of course, we know that sodomy is what caused the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So you have this connection to sexual promiscuity, just the worst and most depraved sexuality, leading to the destruction of the world twice. You have the rainbow in the middle. Now, today, we have a movement that has adopted the rainbow as their movement, but it's like giving God the fig. They're saying, oh, you said you wouldn't destroy the world, and guess what? We're going to do it again. And we're going to be more flamboyant and worse than we were before. So fast forward, just recently we had a massive hurricane, a Category 5, headed towards the coast of Florida. Thousands and thousands of masses, rosaries, and exorcistic prayers were said against that hurricane. And as soon as it made landfall, it dissipated. It reduced to a Category 2 within a matter of hours. Now, there was still destruction, but it wasn't anywhere near what it could have been.
We were all hearing Florida was going to be wiped off the map.
Exactly.
Like, that's what they were telling us.
The cone of death. All right. So suddenly this massive hurricane dissipates as soon as it makes landfall. And then what happened that evening? You had a rainbow effect coming from the sun, bathing the top of the earth. Okay, so now we've got a connection between deluge and colors. And at the same time, what's going on in the Vatican? Pope Francis is accepting transgenders and having a meeting with them and talking to them about the possibility of allowing for individuals to have sex change operations because, somehow we have to be more welcoming of the LGBT community. And James Martin's up there prancing around and saying how wonderful this new synod is and how they're talking about finding ways to embrace the LGBT community. And Pope Francis elevated Timothy Radcliffe, the most radical homosexualist in the Dominican order, to the rank of cardinal, or at least he announced that he's going to do that. So you have a connection now: sodomy, with the deluge, with the rainbow. And the question is, what's the fire falling from the sky? We are right now sitting on the precipice of World War III. Do I think that there's a connection? Do I think that there's going to be some sort of retribution for what's happening? I absolutely do. Do I think that it's a fait accompli? Well, no. I mean, it never is until it happens. But we are living in prophetic times. And I think that it is extremely, it's extremely dangerous for us to discount this and say, oh, you're reading into things. Yeah. What is happening in the world right now and the things that are happening in the church are spiritually deadly, and they invite the demonic. They invite the powers of hell in. So and if you look all through scripture, you see the number one thing that God punishes for are idolatry and sexual perversion. Those are the two things, and they're linked. They're always linked. So we're in it. Okay. Do I think that this is a prophetic warning? Maybe, but I think that it behooves us to be aware of the signs of the times.
The fire of the sky from the sky could also actually be the solar storms that cause the aurora, because we're at the peak of the solar maximum for the rest of this year and into 2025.
It could happen.
So solar activity is increasing, and a storm that causes aurora, down to Missouri, as some people were saying, I mean, that could easily knock out entire electrical grids.
Right.
The thing about to kind of remember too is the whole nature of the earth and the nature of sun. We really think that we've got it all figured out, and we really don't have a clue. The idea that the sun is just some ball of gas, nuclear ball of gas, not so much. The cosmic rays are really what activate the core of the earth. It sends the energy from the cosmic rays into the core of the earth. And that's what causes all kinds of seismic activity. And that's why we typically have, during sunspots, we'll have flare-ups and volcanic eruptions and whatnot. The other thing too is when Christ said, and described these things, what will be like in the end, he never said God was going to do that stuff. He just said, this is what's going to happen. He didn't say that it wasn't something that was brought about by man and man's evil inclinations and man's association and the influence of the demonic on man. So the fire from the sky coming down, it doesn't have to be, balls of phosphorus or, burning phosphorus or something. It could be nuclear warheads for crying out loud. One of the things that I find interesting, I keep an eye on, is the big star Betelgeuse that's so unstable right now. That they don't know. They keep saying this thing is going to go supernova really soon. It may already have, but it's 600 plus light years away. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if somehow that was the cause of the cross, in that every nation will see in the sky, that we see something, that will actually look like a cross in the sky. Whether it's all these things have, I mean, the sky.
Even think about because what we were talking about, how we don't see the sky the same as we once did. But part of the reason that I think evolution and the study of the solar system and all of our science has kind of dulled the intellect of man is because when you read in scripture and you read in the apocalypse, it talks about stars falling from heaven. Now, those also symbolize bishops falling from their seats, things like that. Demon. Yeah, like it all had significance, like symbolic significance. When activity in the heavens would happen, we would always relate that to things on the earth. When pestilence would hit, when a plague would come, we, at one point in time, would don sackcloth and ash because we thought God was punishing us for our sins. We've materialized everything so much to the point where now we just write it off as just some activity in the universe, and it's we've completely lost all sense of sin and the effect our sin has on creation.
Absolutely.
I've said many times when we deviate from the proper worship of God, just like the Jews did when Solomon built all the temples to his wives and concubines for their idolatry, what happened? They were destroyed. I mean, when we had the proper worship of God, which is the true mass, the sacrifice, the true continuation of Calvary, the Western world thrived. It didn't mean that we weren't besought by enemies, but we thrived, and we came out, and what we did with architecture and art and literature and music and everything, agriculture, even you name it, we just exploded far, far, far beyond any other civilization. I believe it was because of our proper worship of God. And then when we move away from that, we can expect the fall. And we have. And I got, I'm sorry to say that I don't think the Novus Ordo is the proper worship of God, personally.
So here's something that's very
valid, but I just don't think it's. I don't think it's right.
Nothing controversial. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So here's something that's really interesting, and it's often overlooked in the book of Genesis when they're talking about when Moses, because Moses is the one that wrote down the book of Genesis, when he wrote down the account of the Tower of Babel, he wrote this. He said, "The Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the people had built. Then the Lord said, if now, while they are one people and all have the same language, they have started to do this, nothing they presume to do will be out of their reach." That's a really, really interesting thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
Why would he say nothing they presume to do will be out of their reach? The reason is because while sharing a common language, and keep in mind, they were still living for a rather long period of time at this point. They were still living for a couple hundred years at least.
Oh, yeah. Longer.
You have people living for 200 years sharing the same language. Could you imagine a civilization of people all sharing the same language, having the intellect of Einstein, Tesla, Mercola, all these, or not Mercola, what's his name? The guy that invented the radio. Marconi, that's it. You get all these brilliant minds together. They live for 200 years. They're sharing a common language. They're talking ideas. They're sharing ideas. They're all putting this stuff together. How quickly would it be for them to create a civilization like what we've got now?
Yeah.
So what did God do? He confused their tongue, and suddenly they couldn't even build a tower together. So the ability to retain and transmit information is at the very heart of the rapid increase of technology. If we look at what's happened over the last 150 years, the reason that we've had such a rapid increase in technology, I mean, for crying out loud, we went from horse and buggy to putting a man on the moon in 66 years.
Anthony might question that.
You're putting a rocket in the stratosphere, and
the government can steer hurricanes, but no, we can't put a man in the moon.
Listen to me. Part of the reason I don't
we just forgot how, right? It just nobody remembers where we put that file with all that technology.
Well,
right?
part of the reason I don't like the moon landing is because the moon is
we're gonna go there.
We reached it and it took its meaning away. Like the moon is supposed to mean something. It's like Our Lady in the apocalypse is like she's clothed with the sun, with the stars. It's another thing to take away the meaning from the heavens by us just being able to we just plopped up there. It's no big deal. We just went up there and then totally forgot how we did it. And
here's what I want to point out. Here's what I want to point out about the Tower of Babel, though. Around that time period, you have a massive amount of mythology that develops out of the development of new languages, because they dispersed, and they went and settled Asia, they went and settled Europe, they went and settled Africa and everywhere else. So they spread out, but they all carried a commonality in their mythology. They all carried a commonality in their in a general sense of just of what's out there. And if you look at all of them, they all talk about chimeras, these half man, half beast creatures. Why were they talking about half man, half beast creatures? That's a very strange thing. Unless they were trying to do something prior to the Tower of Babel, like manipulate the genome. I'm not saying that they did, but what I'm saying is, if you understand
that's how we
what the world may have. What's that?
Nothing.
No, that's how we got Italians. He's got to throw
Italians. Yeah.
I've got an answer to that in my book, but we can get to that another day. Here's
where I want to go with it, though.
Yeah.
Because
go ahead.
The whole topic that we're going into is transhumanism, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With transhumanism, the very first trans being was the devil, who said to himself, I will rise to the heights of the heavens. I will become like God. He stated that he would become something that he is not. He would transition from his nature to a different nature. So that's a statement of transition. He falls from heaven. What does he do? He goes into the garden and he finds Eve and he tells Eve, hey, if you eat that fruit, you're not going to die. Your eyes will be opened and you will become a statement of transition, like gods, plural. So not singular gods, like one of us demons. And she found that, delightful, and she was tempted by that. So this idea of transitioning was from the very beginning. It's from the very beginning. This idea that you can change the nature of a thing. What is alchemy? Alchemy is this idea that you can transition gold or lead into gold. You can change the nature of the thing. What's evolution? Evolution is this trans-species idea that you can change one animal form into another animal form. So now you're talking about a transitioning going across every science and all mythologies, all through history leading up till now. And what are we doing? We've got this rapid increase of technology. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to splice human genes with animal genes. They're trying to integrate the human body with computers. And they're trying to do so to make us into a new thing. They're always talking about the new man. You've got Teilhard de Chardin, who talks about the cosmic Christ. And what is the cosmic Christ? Well, it's all of us coming together in this new transformation so that we all become Christ in some way, shape, or form.
And all of it is a mocking of transubstantiation, right? Where you actually have where, look, we believe the bread and wine maintain what they look like, but their substance changes. They maintain that their appearance changes, but the substance is staying the same because they were born that way. It's like this weird twisting of transubstantiation that we're all seeing with that movement, with all of it.
It's also there's a reason why demons inhabit human bodies, but angels don't, because the demons want to transition into God by having a blasphemous incarnation.
Yeah.
They want to become human the way God became man. So they will possess a human body. And it's right there in the very beginning when in the name Michael, what does Michael mean? It's a question.
Who is like unto God?
Who is like God? Okay. And the reason he's asking who is like God is because Lucifer said, I will become like the Most High. So in saying, I will become like the Most High, what's he saying? He's saying, I also will take on a human nature. And Michael comes to the defense and says, who is like God? And he has an answer. He's pointing at man. Man was made in God's image and likeness, not the angels. Therefore, you are doing something that is abominable. And that is why you had the war in the heavens. So this understanding of what's going on in the heavens, you can't understand the fall of man unless you understand the fall of the angels. And you can't understand the crucifixion unless you understand the fall of man. Because the crucifixion and all the subsequent events and everything leading up to it is an undoing of all of the elements of the fall.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That's in my book too, by the way.
Awesome.
When I'm defining original sin, because original sin is Morgoth. Morgoth, he is the big bad guy who mars everything. Is original sin. Ungoliant, who comes in from the outside the void, is mortal sin, and she kills the two trees of light, which are the rational will, which is the silver tree Telperion, who later becomes in the fallen version Tom Bombadil, and then the golden tree is Laurelin, and she's the rational intellect of the conscience. And she becomes Goldberry. Her name's very interesting because when they died, Telperion gave one last silver flower, and Laurelin gave one last silver fruit, and their spirits were taken and put into the body. And that's where Goldberry gets her name. The fruit was a berry. It's Tolkien's great like that. But Tom Bombadil's name was used before, so his name was already given. He was a doll of, I believe, Christopher Tolkien's, one of his toys.
Rob, you would love this book.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to get it.
Yeah, I felt
I
like
know where you can get one.
we're gonna push it.
I can sell you a pallet of them.
I
One grow.
felt like I was missing something because I hadn't read the Silmarillion and I hadn't actually read the Lord of the Rings. I'd only seen the movies. I started reading the Lord of the Rings, but it just I felt like I was missing. Like I feel like I got to go back read those books before I read your book.
Yeah.
So
I have to admit, all the parts with Tom Bombadil I skimmed.
Oh, see, Tom Bombadil and Goldberry, they're the whole point. In fact, when Frodo feels like somebody, when he says, "I will take the ring," that wasn't him. He felt like somebody else is using his voice. That's Tom Bombadil. And that's
I
why,
was like, oh,
yeah.
he's still singing.
yeah,
Oh,
it's
he's
Tom
singing some
Bombadil
more.
because he's the music. He's the author. Well, it wasn't the author.
Mhm.
It's the mighty theme that Iluvatar. We all have a mighty theme from whence we're all sung into being. That's our formula or essence. It's all hylomorphism of Aristotle, of the Scholastics.
all right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna promote your book. We're gonna tell people where they can get it, and then we're gonna go over to locals because I want to get a little deeper into the apocalyptic things that we're seeing. I want to talk a little bit about the people in the Old Covenant.
Yeah.
Because there's some things happening there that conversation I have with my wife. I want to talk about a candidate for the Antichrist that I see on the horizon that everybody seems to love this guy, but I think he's up to a little bit of shenanigans and I don't trust him very much.
Did he just launch a big rocket today?
He just launched a big rocket.
Would his initials be EM?
Oh, they certainly would. And it's some of the things I see, I'm just like, this is like,
He's in our book too. That's the Tower of Babel. That's the microchip's Neuralink.
So, okay. So we're going to go over to locals because I want to be able to talk freely without worrying about Michael already basically put us on like red alert.
Yeah, this is going to be kicked off YouTube before we're even done.
I freaking love having Michael on. He's just like a bunch of information, but hopefully I mean, I don't think he said anything we shouldn't, but it's definitely going to be one of those. We skirted the edge on that one, but I want to be able to go and just say whatever we want to say without worrying. So we're going to go over to locals. So Paul, where can people get your book?
Oh, I mean, they can get it anywhere. Everybody who sells books sells it. It's doing pretty well on Amazon. We've got a 5-star review and everybody loves it. They're blown away by it. And
if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, this book is going to blow you away because I haven't read it and I was like, holy cow, this is like the mind of Tolkien is it's an enigma how like profound every single insight this guy had.
Yeah. Well, he was a scholastic. He had a real education, not a Cartesian education. People don't realize. I mean, he was a alumnus at the Oratory in Birmingham. So was Hilar Belloc a generation before. Tolkien, as a child, actually lived in John Henry Newman's cottage with John Henry Newman's grave right outside the door. Father Francis Morgan, who was J.R.R. Tolkien and his brother Hilary's guardian after Mabel, the saintly Mabel, died for the faith to make sure that the children remained Catholic. He was actually John Henry Newman's personal secretary for 25 years. And so John Henry Newman, that's the Numenor. The Numenorians are the beautiful combination of faith and reason. Men are reason and elves are faith. And the Numenorians are the highest of the reason when they're still elf friends. And then when they attack the immaterial, Rob, you'll know what I'm talking about. And Numenor is swamped, and and then Arda becomes round and separated from the immaterial. That's Cartesian dualism.
They do such a good job of this in the Rings of Power on Amazon, right? They show this beautifully.
I'm kicking.
Oh, God Almighty!
Okay. Don't worry, we got rid of them.
That'll get you thrown off YouTube. I mean, it should. See, that's the thing too. When they colonize the mind and they give you these blasphemous anti-Tolkien images, there's a whole generation now of kids that have watched that and they won't be able to get that out of their mind, and it's just totally spoiled. And don't think that's not part of the plan. There's a reason that they're willing to dump billions of dollars and waste and actually suffer the consequences of their stupidity, and be harassed and be ridiculed by real Tolkien fans. They don't care. It's all about denigrating his image and disconnecting humanity from this beautiful mythology. And they're doing a good job.
So it's a good point. All right, guys, we're going to go over to locals. So please go support Paul's endeavor on trying to break through. I mean, it's such an insanely deep thesis. And
Yeah.
anybody like so, and also somebody had asked like if he could break down what each person does. If you guys go watch Michael's interview with Paul, they go through what each, so the hobbits are the habits. It's they're basically like the virtues, the 4 virtues, but they go in depth into all of that. So if you guys want to do a little bit of a deeper dive, go check out Michael's interview with Paul, and you'll get there. And then buy Paul's book, and we will see you guys over on Locals. We're going to do a little bit.
My wife will kill me if I don't do this. If you can scan that.
Well, hold it up steady.
Sorry.
Hold it steady. Don't move.
Hold on. There we go.
Hold your phone up to that, guys, even though he's shaking. All right. Do
Work.
a screenshot and you guys can get that. And you can get the book there.
Yeah. It's readmountdoom.com. I'll put the book in the mail. I'll sign it. Send it
Excellent.
to you. Yep.
All right. We'll see you guys on the other side. Rob, you guys stay right where you are. We're going to just kill the YouTube feed.
Rob's going to go get us a beer.
Go ahead.
I am going to go get another one. Okay, here we go.